Hello everyone, and welcome to the 31st plagiarized episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring John Boyega from the Star Wars sequels. A fraudulent, self-entitled ass clown crying racism at every turn, with no care for context or assessment. And it pains me to make this video, because I used to think John Boyega was really cool. I mean, after all, he personally narrated a preview for the second Battlefront 2, and he's got the iconic quote that you ain't gonna Disney Plus me. Yeah, well, I think he's since walked back on that, and his whole statement about being done with Star Wars. So you really can't rely on him sticking to his word. If you've been keeping track of the idiotic things actors usually say that only demonstrate how out of touch they are, like Mark Hamill wishing Carrie Fisher a happy birthday posthumously, and then going on a rant about which one of them hated Donald Trump more, as if anyone asked, John Boyega has basically been blaming fans for being racist. In the age of Disney Star Wars making woke as shit, politically pandering products, and artificially diversifying the cast, even if it means hiring actors who are grossly unqualified, this guy thinks that Star Wars is too white. Can someone tell me why it matters so fucking much to these people that there's a lot of white guys in Star Wars? I never once thought about the ethnicity of the characters until Disney made such a song and dance about it. So John Boyega whines about how black people were always relegated to sidekicks in Star Wars, and blaming the fans for this, instead of the writers, the ones actually making the movies. And John Boyega has a really short memory, because wasn't most of everyone anticipating The Force Awakens to be Finn's story as he picked up a lightsaber and defied the First Order and whatnot? Yeah, everyone was fucking hyped for that. But it turns out they fucking lied. Rey was the actual main character who was actually going to do the final duel. So literally next to everybody was ready for Finn to kick ass as a Jedi, only to have our expectations subverted by giving it all to Rey instead. And Finn was mostly there to shout, "Rah!" Literally one of the biggest talking points of the sequel trilogy after it was done was how wasted Finn was, and how people wished Finn was used more. It's clear that John Boyega has done next to no observations on what people generally said about the failure of the sequel trilogy, and at the same time, blaming the wrong people, but by doing so, he's basically revealed his true colors. John Boyega, despite being completely fine in terms of living standards are concerned, he still feels like he's a victim of racism, even though it's unlikely that he faced any real racist hardship in his life. It's basically just self-entitlement that just because he's black, the world has to revolve around him, because he's super fucking special. Yeah, actual civil rights activists in the 1960s would be ashamed to know someone like him, because they actually had to put the work in for equality, and this guy is so narcissistic, he thinks the world owes him a favor, and he expects as much too. I'd like to point out, however, that this is completely hypocritical on his part. It's old news now, but when the whole George Floyd situation was ongoing, John Boyega was going on about how he hated racists, but then dismissed someone who replied to him when he mentioned a black on white incident. He then rudely dismissed the prospect that racism can happen to anyone. Yeah, John Boyega is basically the believer that blacks are always the victim, and there's no such thing as reverse racism, which is completely false. Maybe John Boyega should spend a day with Cameron Monaghan, who was lambasted by fucktards because he was white. Because people said, like him, despite being spoon-fed non-white and non-male protagonists after another, they flipped their shit when Cal Kestis was revealed. And that couldn't do because white people are disgusting and deserve to be genocided. Okay, I made that last part up, but look at what people actually said. Some dumbass dismissed Cameron Monaghan, whose likeness was also used in Fallen Order, as the captain of the swim team in a slasher film. Whatever that means. So yeah, it's people whining when Disney Star Wars didn't engage in woke identity politics once in a full moon. And they got very, very angry. So yeah, John Boyega is completely out of touch. I also don't think John Boyega appreciates his prominence in the sequel trilogy. he basically whined because he was number 2 and not number 1, which is beyond entitled. Because to him, it doesn't matter if you're a main character. If you're not the head honcho, it's racism. And that really explains why he was so opposed to Mace Windu and Lando Calrissian. Sorry, but black people being, quote, sidelined is not racism, nor does it make Star Wars too white. And I don't think Mr. Boyega actually understands anything about Star Wars and the casting. Like how a lot of actors came from the United Kingdom in the 1970s and 80s, and obviously back then, they were mostly Caucasian since they natively came from Great Britain. And also the fact that the main overarching character was Anakin Skywalker. So yeah, no shit that he and his family took up the prominence in the saga before you came into the picture. John Boyega probably watched the Star Wars movies on a casual level, and then listened to whatever J.J. Abrams told him was real Star Wars. So I'm not surprised. I also have to point out that a lot of the casting for the prequel trilogy, when it came to characters not in the original trilogy, were pretty colorblind. Like for Qui-Gon Jinn, for example, I hear George Lucas actually originally envisioned an American actor to play him. And one of the runner-ups for the role was Morgan Freeman. But Liam Neeson proved to be what George Lucas wanted, even if he was from Northern Ireland. Mace Windu, by extension, was not specifically envisioned to be black. It's just that Samuel L. Jackson ended up winning the audition and starring in The Phantom Menace. George Lucas cast who was right for the role, not who checked off the most DEI points. And it's something I really wish Star Wars could get back to. So in general, John Boyega is pretty ignorant of Star Wars history. Again, he probably just went off of what J.J. Abrams told him, never speaking to George Lucas once about this stuff. And to be honest, I'd be surprised if he even met George Lucas. So in short, John Boyega is obsessed with victimizing himself and using his skin color as a weapon to condemn Star Wars fans for being racist, when he has no evidence, while being the same guy who doesn't believe in reverse racism, and in general pointing the finger at the wrong people. There's a reason John Boyega made Star Wars fans so angry that they were making videos about his comments. Again, I used to think he was cool, but he's yet another clown who can't be satisfied having the number 2 spot in a Star Wars trilogy. No, it has to be number 1. And if it's not number 1, people are just racist. At this rate, John Boyega has done nothing but create the stereotype that privileged black people, like John Boyega and Amandla Stenberg, are so far up their own asses that they'll cry racism despite never having faced true racial prejudice or hardship in their lives. Yeah, I'm sure some fuckwit in the past walked up to you and called you the N-word and it hurt your feelings. So what? You're probably more of a racist than that guy ever was, because it's becoming increasingly clear that John Boyega thinks his blackness gives him a get-out-of-jail-free card at all times. I wouldn't be surprised if he secretly hates white people. I mean, I've read about how he doesn't date white girls, which I can assume now is for no other reason than his own racial prejudice. Even if most white people haven't done anything to him, and it was a white guy who chose him for Star Wars in the first place. Again, I really wanted to continue thinking that John Boyega is cool, but once again, he has fallen to the dark side, and came out as an example of a newfound evil. Thank you for listening to this episode of Analyzing Evil. What do you think of John Boyega? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm JG Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
Under the mountain, a golden fountain. Were you praying at the